Hello, my name is Savio and this is another OpenSwoole video. This is the WebSocket Part 2. Let's do it. So in this video, we will see how to build a WebSocket server command, how to serve HTTP and WebSockets with one server, how to identify the users, and how to implement real-time communication with those users. For our app changes, we are basically going to add a WebSocket server command, and this WebSocket server will have static files enabled with user identification. So we'll see that with with Swoole table implementation. And then we are going to adjust the token structure to count and limit uses. And this is for our security. You will see further in the video about that. And then we're going to implement the UI changes. So as known, if you've been watching our previous videos, everything in our app runs through command line. So when we start our HTTP server, is a command line that runs specific procedures to start our server. And here are the procedures. We just instantiate a server class and prepare a sequence of callbacks for the server to start, and that's it. So what we're going to do now to begin with this WebSocket implementation is we're going to copy this HTTP server in order to have our WebSocket server starting with a similar command, and that's all for the first step. So let's go there and just save this as WebSocket. There it is. And WebSocket server. And instead of having an HTTP server, we will have the WebSocket server. And because the WebSocket server is extended from the HTTP server, we won't have a problem with the existing callbacks. We will just need to update them a little. So let's start with this right here. So let's put a WebSocket. There's an error here. Let's use this typo. So let's call it the WS server for the command to exist. And instead of HTTP server is WebSocket server. And for the configuration, we'll have a few parameters here. So let's call on the Symfony console the set definition. You can find out more about this library that I'm using for commands on the Symfony console documentation. But you can also go back in the videos and see when I built our first commands in order to have this. So let's go there and continue. So here I will add one input option, and this input option is going to be for the port to be customizable. So let's make this port customizable, and this option is optional, so let's add it as optional, and let's describe what it does. So it's specify the port for the WebSocket server. There it is, and let's put a default value 8080. And the next parameter is going to be an input option, and this parameter is going to be HTTP. And here we're going to specify whether this WebSocket server serves HTTP as well or not. And the argument for this point here is basically it's not always useful to have both served by the same server. I'm not going into details for this right now. So I'm putting here as an option. We will use as the same, but I'm being flexible for future videos. Okay, so the short cut null. This is going to be a value known, because I don't want this to be other than null if I don't pass it. So I want this to be null. And this specifying that the WebSocket server will also serve HTTP requests. Okay, so there it is. This is our definition. So our commands have two parameters. And let's go further actually. And by going further, we will see that we'll have the library symphony style and the start. Okay, so the start, I'm not going to call the input from the next private method, just because I don't want to pass input all the way on the chain. So let's change a little strategy. This IO is only used there, so I can easily do something like this. And now I'm going to add other parameters here. So let's put input, get option. Let's grab the port as the first parameter and after the IO. And let's get the option HTTP as the last parameter. So to make things easier here, to read, I will just add something like this that is coming with PHP 8 versions. So let's go there. This is an integer, and this here is a boolean. Okay, so there it is. And now this is a WebSocket server because of what we did. And thinking further, let's see, we'll have WebSocket serving here, and it's not HTTP anymore, it's WS. And let's grab this port dynamically, as I've been doing in other videos. And now I have the port being passed here, so let's put it here. And I also have the HTTP, so let's see the best place to add it. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this with HTTP. So if HTTP we'll have this callback, otherwise we won't. And also let's pass HTTP here in order to show whether this is serving HTTP requests or not. So let's put something like this. This server is also serving HTTP requests. Okay. Now a concern. How we keep the WebSocket connection reliable, even when using different domains and ports for this application. The HTTP server only, which is what we had before, only had one interface for connection, the HTTP protocol. Now we have two, the HTTP and the WebSocket. You can visualize our server like this. First, we have those two interfaces available, the HTTP and the WebSocket. And then the browser will connect to both. Before, when we had only HTTP, it would only connect to the HTTP. Now we'll have both. and browser will connect both. And for the connection with HTTP and the WebSocket, it happens to the same pattern: protocol, URL, and port. The browser access through the website address at the address bar, which is like that. But the same browser, to connect to the WebSocket server, it will do it through JavaScript code, like this. So due to that, we'll need to make the address dynamic. I designed for this case the context flag that will carry all needed information for that connection, all based on the server configuration. So we guarantee that the connection will be correct regardless of the domain and ports this application is put behind. So let's move forward. So here comes one point of decision that will affect us further in the world. So for that, I'm going to add like something like get container, and I'm going to set a flag for that. So let's put WS context, which will mark that this is a WebSocket context. And instead of saying true, I'm also going to pass like the data that might be useful in order to have this. So the port is useful for us. For example, when we are loading the view, we know which port to connect to in order to have this WebSocket connections happening dynamically instead of hard coding the port, things like that. So, okay, now that we have that, we'll have to implement our other callbacks. So the next callback that I want to implement right here is the open, which marks when we are opening the connection. So let's go there and implement this on open. So this on open receives the server as the first parameter and the request as the second parameter. And I'm just going to pass IO so I can write stuff here on the command line. So this open method callback is useful for us in order for us to identify which is one of our requirements. So we want to identify users. So the way I'm going to identify users is through a token. So when we are opening the connection, I'm going to pass a token in order to identify the user who's connecting. There are many other ways of doing the same thing. Let's go there. And if the request comes with a token, so let's go there. If the request comes with a token, actually if it doesn't come with a token, because I'm going to deny if it doesn't come with a token, I'm going to put a token as required so I can always identify the user, and no logged in user will be able to connect to this WebSocket server right here. And here is another concern: how we identify the user connecting to our WebSocket server. So the way to identify our user here is to persist on a Swoole table, which is available on the server through all the connections, and that table will carry the link between the FD, which is the ID of the connection, and the user ID. So that way I will know which user comes from each connection. So let's go, before we go here, let's go back a little, and I need this table set before doing any verification there. So let's, at this point right here, let's start our user table. Okay, so let's go there and create another method and start our table here so we can persist and link the user and the connection. So let's go there and create. The syntax is pretty as the same as in OpenSwoole documentation. So let's go there and put something like this. The size of the table, and let's import these right here. Actually, I have some code ready for this, so here it is. I'm going to use as the ID of the role will be the FD. Okay, so that way I can search which user is from this FD using the FD as the key. Okay, so, and this is available throughout our class in a property. So let's put the property right here. And now we have our user table available, and we can come here again and specify how this is going to work. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to identify the user right here. And if I can't identify the user somehow, if the user doesn't exist in the system, this is going to be unauthorized, just as if there was no token. So let's put something like this. If this identify the user request get token and request FD. So basically this method here will identify the user and at the same time persist when it identifies the user, linking both the user and the FD. And in case this doesn't pass, this verification doesn't pass, I'm going to force the disconnection. So let's go there and disconnect this specific FD so we don't allow people to connect and do unauthorized stuff on our chat. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting a code that specifying that there is a invalid data passing, and here is the reason. So on the WebSocket client, you will be able to get this reason and show to the user. I'm not going to do this in this video, but yeah, you will be able to do such. And then I'm going to explain to the user what happened. So error failed to connect, not to the user, but for anybody who has access to the logs. Okay. Oh, to the console. My bad. Okay, there it is, and return. Otherwise, if this test pass and the user exists, and we link the user with the FD, and there is a token, we are going to inform that the connection is open. There it is. So this is our open event. We are identifying users. So let's go there and build this method. So this method is going to be a little tricky. So I already prepared it. Let's just write this down. Oops. And passing the token and the FD. There it is. And actually, because it's in validation, I'm expecting a Boolean value. Oh my god, so many types. New keyboard. Okay, so I already have, and let's go through this method. Okay, so what I'm doing in this method here is basically I'm grabbing the logger from the container. That's not new. And then I try catch a verification. So this verification is basically on the token model. I grab the token from the token model and I consume it. This is a method that we're going to build it right here. And there is a very specific reason for this, is because the token is going to be used in the front end. when we are using a token in the front end, I don't want other people to be able to connect as if they were this user. So I'm consuming it because this is going to be a single-use token for security purpose. So let's import this, and if we try to consume a token that doesn't have more uses possible, this is going to throw an exception, and we will destroy this token and throw an exception saying invalid token, return false, and this will cause the user trying to reuse a consumed token to be disconnected. And then we have a decoded JWT token. This is used in our middlewares already. So when we are connecting via API, we use this decode JWT token to grab the data that is stored in the token, such as the user ID. And with that, we will get the identification that we want. We want to know who is using, who is the user behind this token. So if the code token doesn't have a user ID, throw an exception again, because this token, even though is a valid token, has our key to decrypt and all, it doesn't have the necessary data. And then with the user ID in hand, we grab the user. Again, if the user doesn't exist, throw an exception, return false, disconnect the user. If everything else passes, we go here and we actually this shouldn't be here, be info. So we say user identified, we say which user, and then we link. So what we're doing is we are linking the FD and putting in this FD the rest of the information we want. Usually we would only need the user ID, but I don't want to, every message coming into the server, I have to search for the username again so I can show in the front end who's that user. So I'm just going to store the name right there. So with this in hand, we have our connection steps prepared. And then we have to implement our disconnect event, callback, in order for us to, for example, delete the record on our Swoole table when the user disconnects. Of course, this is not the final solution for the disconnection, but this is going to avoid us some headaches, not all of them, but some headaches for having records that shouldn't be there. So let's go there, server on disconnect. Okay, server and FD. These are the inputs on the callback of the disconnect event. And in this disconnect event, again, I'm going to put here just in case like someone thinks that this is the final solution and it's going to solve everything. So the way I think, like some further heartbeat strategy will be necessary to make sure we clean this table. Okay, just to remember ourselves that there might be some extra steps for this to be really where we expect, but then if the FD exists in our Swoole table, so we can check like this, we're going to go there and user table del FD. There it is. We're deleting this record. And now to our last callback at this part of the code, which is going to be our message callback, which is the most important of the WebSocket server. So let's go there and implement. The inputs of this callback is the server and the other one is the frame. The frame carries the data coming in, and the server, of course, is the server information. And here I'm just going to bring the IO so we can write down stuff on the console and how this is running. So first thing we're going to write is info message coming in, which is going to be the frame data. And then we're going to do the same thing as in the other server, which I'm just going to copy through and here it is. Didn't copy properly. Here it is. And if this is established, we're going to come here and push. Okay, so here is a difference. We're not going to just broadcast exactly the message that is coming in anymore, because now we have a user identification to send, like which user is sending this message. So we're going to dispatch fd and then JSON. We're going to encode the message in the JSON format, and there I'm going to add the user who's sending the message. So let's go there on our user table, get from the FD this field right here, user name, and then the second parameter, the message frame data. That's how we're going to do it. So this way our server is serving the message with the user who's sending that. And now another concern: how we make sure a token can be only used once. So now we are going to implement our consume. So we have this consume running right here, right? So let's go there and implement this method on our token model. So first thing, let's go there. This is going to return self, because when we're using the consume, we're actually grabbing the token. So I'm consuming while I'm grabbing the record to make things more streamlined. So let's go there and this, okay, here is. I will enhance our migration for this code. I don't have a migration build like on Larva as an example, where we have a sequence of migrations that we can add later in the project. Maybe this is a content of a future video. At this stage of a project, I'm just going to update the migration that we already have in place as a command right here. So let's go there and implement this. So migrate users, migrate JWT, and here it is. So there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two fields for us to be able to track how many uses our token has. So the first field is going to be uses. So right after token, here it is, uses as an integer, and the default is 0. This will mark how many times the token has been used. And I'm going to add a use limit, which is going to represent how many times the token can be used. And when 0, which is the default, is unlimited, but when is bigger than 0 is limited and must be respected. Okay? So here is our update to our migration. And then here I have, if you know Eloquent, I have to add, if I want to use that field by updating using update method and all, I have to go here and add those fields right here as available. And now we go back to the consume method, and if use limit is different from 0, which represents that we are actually tracking how many times this token is being used, and is uses is bigger or equal the use limit, what we're going to do is we're going to delete this token and throw a new exception token already consumed. Okay, so there it is. If this is not true, let's just this uses plus 1, and let's save and return this. Okay, so here is our method, consume. And here we have an OpenSwoole detail. When serving static files on your server, a configuration is needed. And the configuration needed is document root, enable static handler, and static handler locations. The static handler locations will specify some JavaScript, CSS, HTML locations. Document root is where those locations are located. And of course, enabling, being Boolean, will mark as enabled or not. We will have some JavaScript existent in our server. So let's go back to our server, and this time we're also going to update the HTTP server in case we have something similar in the future. And before we start our server, we're going to specify which folder static files will be grabbed from. So let's go there, set configuration. You can find all of these as a configuration in the Swoole's documentation page. So document root, which is the root of the static files folder. So if you've been following our videos, we have this constant root dir existent in our application, and this root dir is actually specified at the my app file right in the beginning. So every time you run my app command, which is every time, you will have this constant available for you. So go back and specify document root. Now we specify enable static handler to enable it. Static handler true, and then static handler locations. And for now, just JavaScript. Okay, so let's just copy this through so we have this on our HTTP servers as well. Now that we have this, we have to add the WebSocket server command to our list of commands. So let's go there and add on our bootstrap. So let's go there, app, and add right here. So let's add in the side of the HTTP server. There it is. Now we can call this command. So in order for us to call this command, we just have to call my app, AWS server, and there it is. We have our server. So we have an exception. This public folder doesn't exist. So let's go there and fix it. So here we are. As you can see, it really doesn't exist. So we're going to come here and create public, and let's go ahead and create the JavaScript folder, which we are specifying there. And let's go further and implement the AWS JavaScript, where we have our WebSocket client JavaScript. And now we are going to fix some existent code to adapt to this new situation where we have a changed JWT usage. So let's go there and fix first our JWT token generation. So let's go find the code. Here it is. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add a new argument. which is going to be an option, of course. New input option for us to be able to specify the use limit. So use limit no is going to be an option, and this specifies the number of times this token can be used. Okay, and here it is. So now that we have this, we'll have to change all the way. So let's go first and add to the validation. Where is the validation? Probably here, right here. So we have 3 arguments coming out of the validation: name, user email, and expire. We're going to add the use limit right here, use limit. And this use limit is going to be added all the way down. So let's go to our validation and add it right here. Use limit. Here we are. The type, and the type of use limit is an integer, and the message is use limit parameter must be an integer. Okay, and then we return it right there. So up, we are going to pull it from the options right here. Get option, use limit, then we'll add it, use limit. So now that we finished this validation again, let's go back to that method. We have the use limit right there, and that use limit is going to be used for the token creation. So because the token will be can be created now during the WebSocket connection, because we're going to create one just for each connection, it's a good idea to move this to a place where we reuse the procedure to create a token. And for us to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disappear with the whole code, and I'm going to call a common method here that will be called on the other side as well. So create, and the parameters, again, I'm using named parameters here that I like a lot because it's easier to read. Expire, and use limit. I put user limit. Okay, it's use limit. Okay, there it is. So I'm calling a token record, and I was actually writing the token, so there it is. Okay, with this in hand, you can see that I don't have the create method in the JWT object. So let's go there and create that method. I already saved that code, and we're going to just go there and add that method. So let's go there, the JWT, and add this method right here. So here we are. And instead of uses limit, change it to use limit. There it is. I already have some explanation for each parameter, and it's just the same as it was before. If you want to know more about it, go back in the video where I was first implementing the security for our APIs, and there is all the explanation you'll need for this. I have one more update for this JWT token class here. And the other update is when we get the token, because now we have this model where the tokens are consumed, right? We're not just retrieving the tokens anymore, we are consuming them. So as you can see here, I can return null or the token. There is no exception thrown from this procedure. So let's go here and wrap this with try and catch here, right here, and token, let's call it token record catch, and here I'll have exception, and then I return null if there is an exception, and I also going to log it, right? So get container, get I can probably build some helpers to make it easier, right? And valid token, okay, there it is. And now I need to bring this from the global. Okay, so with this in hand, I will have the record to return. So there's only one more thing here. So here we're just missing one other item. So here we can just go ahead and test our new token functionality. So we make sure that at least the token cycle of use limits and all are working properly. So I already have a tests ready for it. I'm just going to go through it explaining. So token test.php, actually name of the class, and here we extend from test case. There it is. Now just import all the tests that I have in place, and let's go through it. This is just the beginning of every test in our application. If you want to understand more, just go back on our videos when I talk about tests first, and then test we can generate a token, and I'm simply generating a token via command line and checking if the token is usable after. So what I'm doing here is I'm making 2 requests, because now that we have a limit, I just want to make sure that further requests might also work. I can specify like 30 requests, but I don't want to go that further. I just want to make sure that like the 0, which is the default number, is not affecting further than 1. So it really means that it's infinite, right? So let's go further. Test can generate token with limit. So now we specify a limit of 1, and we generate a token, and then we make 2 requests. In one request we receive OK, and in the second request we receive a or 1. That's all. That's our tests. So now we can come here in our command line and test vendor in PHP unit to see if everything is passing. All right, we didn't break anything else, and now our token test is also passing. So here we are, and here we are going to test if our command is really working. So let's go there and run it. So server HTTP, there it is, our server is running. All good at this point. Let's test further. All good. It's working as it was working before. So now we're going to implement our UI for us to be using our WebSocket server. So here at the source code, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our strategy when it comes to our pages. So let's go first to the admin and see. So on our admin page, we have everything loaded in one view. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our strategy to use something, to use a template. That's it. So I already have some code ready for us. And what we're going to leave here is just the content. Everything else is going to be template. So here we are. And notice that I also added the WS context. So I pass all the way through the pages, the views. So I know, I make the pages aware of the existence of a WebSocket context here. And I'm assuming that there is a templates admin part. So let's go there and create it. There it is. And I already have a template file ready for us. And here is basically, I brought over everything else and I added this block right here. If you see on plates, which is our template engine documentation, this is basic stuff. So this here is where the content of the page that is calling this as a template is going to show. And this is going to show right after. This is what I added. When the WS context is not null, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a chat, which is another part, which is another page. And this page is going to be something like right here, shows. And we're going to have a PHP file chat right there. So we're going to add that. And then we're going to specify our WebSocket port and our WebSocket token, and then we load our WS file, .js file that we added here in previously in this video. And now we're going to the second step, which is let's implement our WebSocket. So to implement our WebSocket, we're going to basically bring over the previous version with a few changes. I'm going to just copy through and explain the differences. Okay, so the first difference, we're not going to specify the port as it was before. It was hard-coded. Now I'm putting the port as the parameter I just showed you. And the next thing is the token. So I'm adding the token when it exists to the end of the URL, which is specified right here. And the token is going to be a get parameter, URL parameter. And then I connect. Those are the first changes. The second layer of changes comes to the add input message, to handle incoming messages. When we're handling incoming messages now, because the message is a JSON at this point, we are going to, first of all, we're going to parse the JSON, and then we add the li as we were adding before, but now we have another element that we are naming user, which is a strong tag, and another element that we're naming message as a span. And we, of course, obviously, we're adding the user to the strong, which is going to show in bold, and we're adding the message to the message. So that's what we are doing here. We are grabbing from the parsed data, and then we append everything to the input and display in the output. So if you want to know further about this implementation, there is a brief explanation in the previous video. I recommend you to go there. So let's quickly bring over the chat that I already have prepared, which is a small adaptation of the previous version. This time I have like a small style, like positioning the chat at the bottom right of the screen, and some extra IDs here, parameters and all. So with this in hand, we are done with our UI changes. Okay, being done with this, now we have to update our admin controller. So let's go there and update it. So opening here our admin controller, what I'm going to do is right now we have or data being added this way. Let's first make this a variable to be more flexible. So let's go there, view data, and let's prepare it here, view data. Let's bring the line here to be more visual. And then what we're going to do is we are going to check to bring the WS context, in other words, the WebSocket context, so we can pass to our views. So the thing here is basically this. I'm going to bring the global app, and right after container, okay, with this container in hand, I'm going to come here, WS context. I'm going to check if WS context exists. If it exists, I'm going to array merge a few things. Let's go first here. I'm going to get it, because this comes as an array, right? And I'm going to add an item right here. If it doesn't exist, just going to pass null. Okay, so the missing piece here is because in the WebSocket server we are passing the port. We don't have the token yet, and the token is going to be created right now just for this connection. So let's go there and create it. The JWT token, right? Create, and here we are. The name. So let's put it here. The name, I'm just going to pass a unique ID, and the user, which I already have, the expire, which is going to be null, we don't need it, the use limit, which is going to be 1, and then I grab the token. So this is how we're going to do it. Going back to our browser, let's first start our server, and here we're going to connect, and here we are, our little chat right here. And if I send a message, it's happening. So everything working as expected. So now comes to the point where we need another user in order for us to test if this is really happening as expected. So let's go there and add another user to our seed. So going back to our code here, we're going to our DB, no, not DB, the commands, and the seed command. We have a method called seed users. We'll go there and we are going to add our other user. So here I'm going to change a little the strategy. Oops. So let's, now that we have more users being added, let's do it like this. So now we can bring the other user I'm creating, and this verification is going to change a little. So here we have this other way of do this verification, and in this way of doing the verification, we count if the number of users is the same as the users filtered. And this is interesting because if this fails, the value is null. Array filter passed this way is going to filter out the null values, So if we have two null values, the count is going to count 2, but the count on array filter is going to count 0. So this is how I'm checking. So fail to insert records. And there it is. So now let's test. So here we are with two instances of our browser, one incognito and the other normal. And let's log in and see. So now message 1 went there with Savio, and message 2, there's Marina. So yeah, we are identifying the users, everything working as expected. So in this video, we built a WebSocket server command. We served on this command HTTP and WebSocket with one server. We identified connected users and we implemented real-time communication with it. We changed by creating a new WebSocket server command, and in this implementation we enabled static files, so we load JavaScript on the server, and we implemented the user identification. For all of this, we also adjusted the token structure to count and limit uses, so we have single-use tokens, and we implemented UI changes. So we had the little chat box at the bottom right corner of the screen. In the next video, we'll see routing WebSocket messages, how to do that. See you then.